Elon Musk, Julius Malema, back and forth escalates, deepening South Africa-U.S. tensions. Welcome to the Bold African Voice, BAV. I'm Abdul Karim Kargbo, born and raised in Africa. In today's video, we're diving deep into the escalating tensions between South Africa and the U.S. as two polarizing figures, Elon Musk and Julius Malema, go head-to-head. The controversy surrounding South Africa's land reform policies has sparked an international debate on sovereignty, economic justice, and future diplomatic relations. Let's break down what's really happening and what it means for Africa and the world. Trade relations under scrutiny. The diplomatic conflict between South Africa and the United States has taken a significant turn, raising critical concerns over the future of trade relations, especially under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. This tension is under the spotlight following recent remarks by U.S. figures, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who made headlines by expressing dissatisfaction with South Africa's policies, particularly its stance on land reform. As a result, the nation's access to U.S. markets, a cornerstone of the AGOA agreement, could hang in the balance. The U.S. diplomatic boycott, led by Rubio's decision to not attend the upcoming G20 summit in Johannesburg, signals an intensified focus on South Africa's domestic policies. Rubio's public criticism underscores his belief that South Africa's leadership is doing very bad things, a remark rooted in opposition to the government's land expropriation policies, which have sparked international debate. His concern revolves around the use of the G20 summit to promote issues such as solidarity, equality, and sustainability, which he argues undermine key international economic and political norms. These remarks further complicate the relationship, with implications for future trade, foreign investment, and diplomatic dialogue between the two countries. The G20 summit, a pivotal moment. Johannesburg is set to host the G20 foreign ministers meeting on February 20th and 21, a significant event for South Africa, which will be scrutinized on the global stage. While the diplomatic fallout surrounding South Africa's controversial Land Expropriation Act has been the focus of much of the criticism, another element adding to the tensions is the suspension of American aid funding. This includes funding for crucial HIV/AIDS programs under the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. The ramifications for public health, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, are dire, and such financial blockades raise concerns about the broader socio-political and economic repercussions. Despite these tensions, a rather unexpected twist is emerging in the form of interest from the Trump administration, particularly regarding South Africa's mining sector. At the African Mining Indaba in Cape Town, Scott Woodard, acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Transformation, emphasized U.S. interest in South Africa's rich natural resources, even as other sectors face strain. Trump's second-term executive order focused on economic engagement in sectors like mining, showcasing a nuanced approach to South Africa's economic challenges. However, these efforts are largely in the early stages, and the outcome of this diplomatic dispute will likely shape the trajectory of future engagement. Land expropriation, a divisive issue. One of the most contentious issues in the ongoing dispute is South Africa's land expropriation policy, which aims to address historical inequalities in land ownership. The policy's intent is to redistribute land for public purposes as part of a broader land reform program that includes restitution and tenure reform. According to a recent government land audit, white South Africans currently own 72% of the nation's privately held farms, while non-white groups, Black, colored, and Indian South Africans, hold just 24%. The government's efforts to rectify these disparities have faced international backlash, particularly from right-wing groups in South Africa and abroad, including U.S.-based Afrikaner organizations like AfriForum. The Trump administration has aligned with these critics, asserting that South Africa's land reform policy discriminates against white Afrikaner farmers and violates human rights. In a move that added fuel to the fire, Trump signed an executive order calling for the resettlement of South African farmers as refugees in the U.S. However, this suggestion was met with rejection from Afrikaner groups, who reaffirmed their commitment to staying in South Africa and confronting their nation's challenges head-on. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his defense, rejected Trump's condemnation, asserting that the country's policies were in line with its constitution and efforts to redress decades of inequality. He emphasized that South Africa would not be swayed by foreign pressures and would continue implementing its land reform agenda. This rhetoric only intensified the diplomatic clash, with both sides digging in their heels. Elon Musk and Julius Malema, a clash of titans. The situation was further complicated by comments from Elon Musk, South Africa's most famous expatriate and the world's richest individual. Musk, who has been a vocal critic of South African political leader Julius Malema, has targeted Malema's inflammatory rhetoric. At a rally in 2023, Malema led his Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, party members in chanting "Kill the Boer," a reference to the Boer farmers who were once part of the Apartheid-era white minority. Musk, who has also been a close advisor to Trump, criticized Malema for his provocative words and labeled him an international criminal, calling for immediate sanctions against him. This call for sanctions was quickly rejected by Malema, who responded defiantly, calling Musk a spoiled brat and accusing him of being a beneficiary of apartheid-era privileges. Malema's fiery rhetoric, designed to rally his supporters around the cause of land redistribution and racial equality, has earned him both admiration and scorn. In his retort to Musk, Malema stated, "I really think you have entirely lost your left brain. A typical spoiled brat and direct beneficiary of apartheid whiteness. I know black people look the same to you, typical racist." Malema's defiant position has caused significant tension, not just between him and Musk, but also between the South African government and the international community. His continued advocacy for black South Africans to achieve equality with their white counterparts has made him a polarizing figure, drawing support from many who see him as a champion of the marginalized, while alienating others who view his rhetoric as incendiary. Comparing Africa's political landscape. The South African dispute with the U.S. over land reform and political rhetoric is not an isolated case in Africa. Similar debates about land distribution and ethnic tensions are playing out across the continent, from Zimbabwe's controversial land seizures in the early 2000s to recent discussions in countries like Namibia, Kenya, and Malawi. However, South Africa's unique position as the continent's second-largest economy, its historical context of apartheid, and its strategic importance in global trade make this conflict particularly significant. Comparing this situation to other African nations, one can draw parallels with how global powers engage with African countries based on political and economic interests. The U.S. often uses diplomatic pressure, such as imposing sanctions or freezing aid, to influence African governments' policies. However, these actions can backfire, as they may exacerbate internal tensions and create an atmosphere of defiance among local leaders, as seen in Zimbabwe's historical experience. Looking forward, the road ahead. The evolving tensions between South Africa and the U.S. signal a critical juncture for South Africa's foreign policy and its position in international trade networks. As the country approaches the G20 foreign ministers' meeting, all eyes will be on how it handles the dual pressures of defending its domestic policies while managing increasingly strained relations with the U.S. The future of AGOA, along with trade and investment relations, could hinge on the resolution of these diplomatic disputes. While the Trump administration shows interest in mining partnerships, the broader impact of these tensions on foreign investment, public health aid, and political relationships remains uncertain. As for the land expropriation issue, it will continue to be a divisive force, with both internal and external challenges shaping the country's political future. For now, the rhetoric of leaders like Malema and Musk will continue to fuel the fire, but the outcome of these tensions will ultimately depend on South Africa's ability to navigate this diplomatic storm, while ensuring that its policies reflect the aspirations of all its people. The future of South Africa's engagement with the U.S., as well as its standing within Africa, will be determined by its diplomatic strategies and how it balances internal reform with external pressures. Geopolitical implications for Africa. The ongoing tensions between South Africa and the U.S. over land reform, economic policies, and the rhetoric surrounding figures like Julius Malema carry far-reaching implications not only for bilateral relations, but also for Africa's geopolitical positioning. South Africa, as the continent's second-largest economy, plays a pivotal role in shaping Africa's trade and political influence on the global stage. Its relationship with the U.S. is of particular significance given the large trade volume under AGOA, which has provided African countries with preferential access to U.S. markets since 2000. This trade relationship has been an important driver for economic growth and job creation in the region, particularly in sectors such as agriculture, textiles, and manufacturing. If tensions between South Africa and the U.S. escalate further, it could set a precedent for other African nations in terms of how they approach land reform and the role of foreign influence in domestic affairs. The scrutiny over South Africa's policies could encourage other countries with similar land ownership issues, such as Zimbabwe and Namibia, to further solidify their positions against foreign criticism and sanctions. On the other hand, countries like Kenya and Nigeria, which have managed to balance economic cooperation with global powers and domestic reforms, may distance themselves from such contentious issues, opting to maintain a more diplomatic approach to land reform and economic development. In the broader context of Africa's relations with global powers, the situation highlights the delicate balance between sovereignty and international partnerships. While countries like China, Russia, and even the European Union offer economic engagement and investment opportunities, the U.S. has historically used its influence in the form of aid packages, trade agreements, and international diplomacy to shape policy outcomes in Africa. The way South Africa navigates this issue could have a cascading effect, prompting other African governments to reassess their foreign relations strategies. The impact on South Africa's domestic politics internally, the tension between Elon Musk, Julius Malema, and the U.S. government is not just a foreign policy issue, but also a reflection of deeper divisions within South African politics. The Land Expropriation Act has been a cornerstone of President Cyril Ramaphosa's government agenda, but it is also a deeply controversial and polarizing issue within the country. While it has received support from those who view it as a necessary step to rectify the injustices of apartheid-era land distribution, it has also sparked strong opposition from white landowners, Afrikaner groups, and conservatives, both within South Africa and abroad. The situation has played into the hands of political parties like Malema's Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, which has made land redistribution and the empowerment of Black South Africans its key policy focus. Malema's outspoken stance on land reform has made him a powerful figure in South African politics, but it has also led to his alienation from international allies and powerful figures like Elon Musk, who represent a more pro-business, pro-Western viewpoint. Malema's combative response to Musk's call for sanctions underscores his commitment to continuing the fight for Black South Africans' rights to land and wealth, even at the cost of international condemnation. Ramaphosa's handling of this issue is also under intense scrutiny. While he has defended the Expropriation Act as a means of addressing historical inequities, the broader implications for his administration's relationship with foreign investors and Western powers could be profound. South Africa's economy, already facing significant challenges in terms of unemployment, energy shortages, and corruption, cannot afford to alienate key international partners or risk losing access to critical trade agreements like AGOA. Thus, Ramaphosa faces a delicate balancing act between appeasing domestic demands for land reform and safeguarding South Africa's position in the global economy. The role of international media and public perception. The media's portrayal of the South Africa-U.S. tensions will also play a critical role in shaping public perception and international opinion. Global media outlets have seized upon the escalating back and forth between Musk and Malema, framing it as a clash between two powerful figures, one representing the interests of the global elite, and the other a symbol of radical African nationalism. These portrayals have the potential to influence how African citizens, and the international community view the conflict. In South Africa, the media coverage of the Expropriation Act and Malema's remarks is already deeply divided along political lines. Mainstream media outlets with ties to the business elite often echo the views of figures like Musk, warning of the dangers of land reform policies that could discourage investment and international partnerships. Meanwhile, independent and left-wing media platforms tend to support Malema's views, presenting him as a champion of the disenfranchised and marginalized South Africans who have been historically excluded from land ownership and economic opportunities. For global audiences, the polarized narrative around South Africa's land reform policies and the contentious exchanges between Musk and Malema may serve to reinforce existing stereotypes or create new ones. Western media outlets, particularly in the U.S., may frame the issue as a clash between modernity and nationalism, potentially overshadowing the broader socio-economic context in which land reform is taking place. On the other hand, African media may emphasize the struggle for economic independence and equality, drawing attention to the historical injustices that the land expropriation policy seeks to address. South Africa's strategic response. Given the potential long-term implications of these tensions, South Africa's government will need to adopt a multifaceted strategy to navigate the complexities of its diplomatic and trade relationships. One avenue that the South African government could pursue is deepening ties with emerging markets such as China, India, and other BRICS nations, which have shown a willingness to engage with South Africa in sectors such as mining, agriculture, and infrastructure development. Strengthening these partnerships could serve as a counterbalance to any potential economic fallout from strained relations with the U.S. At the same time, South Africa will likely need to engage in more proactive diplomacy to address international concerns surrounding its land reform policies. This could involve clarifying the specifics of the Expropriation Act and demonstrating how the policy will be implemented in a fair and transparent manner. Engaging with multilateral organizations such as the African Union, AU, and the United Nations, UN, could also help South Africa gain broader support for its land reform initiatives and counter negative perceptions from Western powers. Moreover, South Africa may need to strengthen its domestic efforts to address pressing economic issues, including unemployment, poverty, and inequality, to ensure that the land reform process is not seen in isolation, but as part of a comprehensive strategy to improve the lives of all South Africans, particularly those most affected by historical land dispossession. Moving forward, the path of diplomacy and national unity. As the situation between South Africa and the U.S. continues to evolve, the future of South Africa's foreign relations, trade agreements, and political landscape remains uncertain. The path forward will depend on how South Africa navigates the pressures, both from within its borders and from external forces. Balancing the demands for land reform with the need to maintain positive diplomatic and trade relations will be key to ensuring the nation's long-term stability and growth. The stakes are high, not just for South Africa, but for the broader African continent. If South Africa is able to navigate these tensions successfully, it could emerge as a powerful example of how African nations can assert their sovereignty while balancing the demands of international diplomacy. However, the risks of escalating tensions, both domestically and internationally, could have lasting consequences, affecting the political and economic future of the nation. Regional reactions, impact on African unity. As the tensions between South Africa and the U.S. deepen, the response from the broader African continent will be critical in shaping the future of the dispute. Africa's geopolitical landscape is complex, with varying levels of allegiance to both Western powers and emerging markets such as China, India, and Russia. While some African nations may choose to distance themselves from South Africa's ongoing dispute with the U.S., others may see it as an opportunity to rally behind South Africa's stance on land reform and sovereignty. The African Union, AU, has historically taken a strong position on issues of sovereignty, particularly when it comes to land ownership and the redistribution of wealth. Given the AU's history of supporting South Africa during its apartheid-era struggles, it is likely that many African nations will show solidarity with South Africa's efforts to correct historical injustices. However, some African leaders may express concern over the diplomatic fallout that could result from a prolonged conflict with Western powers, especially with regard to economic partnerships, trade agreements, and aid commitments. The land expropriation issue is not unique to South Africa, and several African countries have grappled with similar challenges. For example, Zimbabwe's land reform policies, which involved the seizure of white-owned commercial farms in the early 2000s, led to years of international sanctions and isolation. While these policies were intended to address the legacy of colonial land ownership, the implementation was often chaotic, resulting in economic collapse, a drop in agricultural production, and widespread unemployment. As such, African countries watching South Africa's land reform policies will be keen to learn from both South Africa's successes and its failures in navigating the complex balance between land redistribution and economic stability. The African response to this issue will likely vary depending on regional priorities. For instance, countries in the Southern African Development Community, SADC, are likely to lend support to South Africa's land reform initiatives, recognizing the shared historical context and the desire for economic empowerment for disenfranchised communities. On the other hand, East African countries, which have often emphasized economic growth and foreign investment, might express concern over the potential negative consequences for South Africa's trade relations with key partners like the U.S. and Europe. South Africa's economic outlook, the role of business and investment. While the political and diplomatic dimensions of the dispute dominate headlines, South Africa's economic outlook will also play a crucial role in the resolution of the tensions. The country's economy, already struggling with high unemployment, energy shortages, and inflation, faces additional pressure as foreign investment begins to decline amid concerns over land expropriation and political instability. The business community in South Africa has been particularly vocal in expressing concern over the economic impact of the land reform policy. Many large corporations and multinational companies operating in the country fear that the expropriation of land without compensation could lead to a loss of investor confidence, prompting businesses to relocate or scale back their operations in South Africa. The mining sector, which has been a key area of focus for the Trump administration, could see significant changes in the coming years if tensions continue to rise. The U.S. has shown interest in South Africa's mining industry, particularly in the context of energy transformation and renewable resources. However, if diplomatic relations continue to sour, the country could miss out on valuable international investment in critical sectors such as mining, energy, and infrastructure. One of the ways South Africa can mitigate the economic fallout from the land reform policy is by reassuring international investors that land redistribution will be carried out in a fair and orderly manner, with clear guidelines and transparency. The South African government could also consider offering incentives to foreign businesses to stay in the country, such as tax breaks, infrastructure development, and access to local markets. By creating a stable and predictable business environment, South Africa can continue to attract investment despite the political tensions surrounding land reform. Additionally, South Africa's ability to diversify its trade partners and reduce its reliance on the U.S. and Europe will be crucial for securing its economic future. Expanding trade with China, India, and other emerging economies will help South Africa reduce the impact of strained relations with the West. These partnerships could also provide South Africa with the resources and support it needs to continue its land reform agenda without facing overwhelming international backlash. The role of African civil society. During this diplomatic crisis, the role of African civil society, including grassroots organizations, human rights groups, and activists, will be essential in shaping the public narrative and driving policy change. South Africa's land expropriation policies have sparked debate among various civil society groups, some of whom see them as a necessary step toward achieving economic justice and equality, while others warn of the potential for social unrest and violence if the policies are implemented poorly. Activists in South Africa have long advocated for the redistribution of land to address the disparities created by apartheid and colonialism. However, they also emphasize the importance of ensuring that the land reform process is inclusive and nonviolent. Civil society organizations could play a crucial role in advocating transparent and accountable land redistribution policies, ensuring that the voices of marginalized communities are heard and that the policy is implemented in a way that fosters social cohesion and stability. At the same time, human rights organizations could continue to monitor the situation closely and raise awareness of any potential abuses or violations of international human rights law. The continued involvement of civil society will be crucial in ensuring that the land reform process does not devolve into a chaotic or violent conflict, but instead remains a peaceful and constructive step toward rectifying historical injustices. The future of South Africa's foreign relations. Looking ahead, South Africa's ability to balance its domestic priorities with its international relationships will determine its place in the global order. The tensions with the U.S. are a test of South Africa's diplomatic resilience, as the country must navigate competing interests from both domestic and foreign actors. While the land reform debate remains at the forefront of South Africa's foreign policy, the country's broader engagement with international organizations, trade blocs, and emerging economies will also shape its future trajectory. South Africa will need to engage diplomatically with both traditional allies in the West and emerging partners in the East to ensure that it remains a key player in the global economy. The upcoming G20 foreign ministers meeting in Johannesburg could serve as a pivotal moment for South Africa to demonstrate its commitment to global solidarity and diplomacy, while also asserting its right to chart its own course on domestic issues like land reform. If South Africa can successfully navigate this diplomatic crisis and maintain a balance between addressing internal grievances and fostering international cooperation, it will set an example for other African nations facing similar challenges. In the long term, South Africa's ability to manage these tensions and maintain stability will determine whether it remains a leading economic and political force on the African continent. South Africa's diplomatic strategy, a delicate balance. As the diplomatic fallout between South Africa and the U.S. continues to unfold, the country's ability to adopt a pragmatic and flexible foreign policy will be crucial. South Africa's approach to this crisis will need to consider both short-term solutions and long-term strategic goals. The recent tensions have underscored the importance of diplomacy, with South Africa caught between domestic demands for land reform and international pressures to adhere to global norms, especially those set by Western powers like the U.S. and European Union. One potential strategy for South Africa is to play a more active role within multilateral organizations like the United Nations, UN, the African Union, AU, and BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. By aligning itself with like-minded countries that emphasize sovereignty, human rights, and regional cooperation, South Africa can build a diplomatic coalition that strengthens its position on land reform. The country's participation in these forums could provide an avenue for rallying support from fellow African nations, while also positioning itself as a key player in broader global debates on equity, development, and international law. South Africa's strategic positioning within the BRICS bloc offers significant leverage. The BRICS countries, which represent a significant portion of the global population and economic power, have increasingly become advocates for a more balanced global order that considers the needs and voices of developing countries. As such, South Africa can use its membership in BRICS to counterbalance the diplomatic isolation that could result from strained relations with the U.S. and its Western allies. In this sense, South Africa's participation in BRICS presents a broader vision of economic cooperation that may appeal to both emerging economies and African states seeking to assert greater influence in global affairs. Additionally, South Africa's diplomatic outreach should emphasize its role as a leader in the African continent, working to foster greater regional unity and economic integration. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, presents an opportunity for South Africa to strengthen its trade relationships with other African countries and reduce its dependence on traditional markets in the West. By positioning itself as a proponent of intra-African trade and collaboration, South Africa can diversify its economic partners, thereby reducing its vulnerability to international pressures. The economic landscape, risks and opportunities. The economic implications of the tensions with the U.S. are vast, particularly given South Africa's reliance on trade agreements and foreign investment. However, these challenges also present opportunities for South Africa to rethink its economic model and diversify its sources of growth. The country's mining sector, which has historically been a cornerstone of its economy, could serve as a key area of focus in the coming years. The Trump administration's initial interest in South Africa's mining sector, particularly in relation to energy transformation and renewable resources, offers South Africa a potential opportunity to secure investment in this critical sector, despite the overall diplomatic strain. South Africa's ability to attract foreign investment in the mining sector will depend on its ability to provide a stable and predictable regulatory environment. As the world shifts toward cleaner energy sources and greater focus on environmental sustainability, South Africa's mining industry must also evolve to meet global standards. This could include greater emphasis on responsible mining practices, ensuring that the country's mineral wealth is harnessed in ways that benefit both its economy and its people. In addition to mining, sectors such as renewable energy, technology, and agriculture also offer significant growth potential for South Africa. The global shift toward cleaner energy presents an opportunity for South Africa to leverage its natural resources, including solar and wind energy, to become a regional leader in green energy. This would not only help mitigate the effects of climate change, but also provide new avenues for economic development, job creation, and foreign investment. Impact on South Africa's social fabric. The land reform issue is deeply intertwined with South Africa's social fabric, and its potential to reshape the nation's future is both immense and complex. The country's historical context of apartheid, which entrenched systemic inequality and racial division, has left a legacy that is still very much evident today. Land expropriation is seen by many as a necessary step in redressing the imbalances created by colonialism and apartheid. However, its implementation is fraught with challenges, including potential social unrest, political polarization, and the risk of exacerbating racial tensions. At the heart of the land reform debate lies the question of who gets to benefit from the redistribution of land. While many Black South Africans support the policy to address historical injustices, concerns remain about the capacity of the government to implement these policies fairly and effectively. Issues of corruption, mismanagement, and inefficiency in land reform programs have plagued previous efforts, raising doubts about whether the current plan will succeed in delivering tangible benefits to those most in need. Moreover, the political dynamics surrounding the land reform debate have the potential to deepen divisions between South Africa's various racial and ethnic groups. While the African National Congress, ANC government, led by President Ramaphosa, supports land expropriation as a vital component of reconciliation and justice, opposition parties and conservative groups, particularly white Afrikaners, view the policy as an attack on their livelihoods and rights. The polarization of this issue is exacerbated by the vocal support of figures like Julius Malema, whose confrontational style and radical rhetoric have further inflamed tensions. The role of civil society in this process cannot be overstated. South Africa's civil society organizations, including human rights groups, land reform advocates, and business associations, will need to continue working to ensure that land reform is not just about redistribution but also about creating sustainable, thriving communities. The challenge will be to find a middle ground that allows for the correction of historical wrongs without causing further economic destabilization or social fragmentation. The path forward, a new African paradigm? As the tensions between South Africa and the U.S. continue to unfold, it is clear that South Africa is at a crossroads. The country must confront its past, chart a course for economic recovery, and forge a path toward greater political and social cohesion. In doing so, South Africa has the potential to redefine its place in the world and set a new standard for African countries navigating the complex dynamics of land reform, economic development, and international relations. South Africa's experience with land reform and its handling of this diplomatic crisis could serve as a model for other African nations grappling with similar challenges. The global community will be watching closely as South Africa seeks to navigate this delicate balance between addressing domestic demands for justice and equity while also protecting its international relationships and economic interests. The ultimate success or failure of South Africa's land reform policies will depend not only on the government's ability to manage the political and diplomatic challenges it faces, but also on its commitment to fostering an inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable future for all of its citizens. If South Africa can achieve this balance, it will undoubtedly emerge as a stronger, more resilient nation, ready to take its place at the forefront of a new African paradigm. Regional and global impact. South Africa's leadership role in Africa. As South Africa navigates the complex web of tensions with the United States, it remains a key player in shaping the political and economic landscape of Africa. With its strategic location, advanced infrastructure, and well-developed financial sector, South Africa holds a unique position on the continent, capable of influencing regional dynamics and global discourse. Its handling of the current diplomatic crisis will reverberate beyond its borders, affecting how African nations approach land reform, economic development, and international relations. The broader African context is also crucial to understanding South Africa's role. Other countries on the continent have been watching closely, particularly those grappling with their own land reform challenges. Zimbabwe's experience with land redistribution in the early 2000s serves as a cautionary tale for South Africa, with many concerned that poorly executed land expropriation could lead to economic collapse and social unrest. However, South Africa's democratic institutions, its vibrant civil society, and its legal framework provide a stronger foundation for addressing these issues, though they are not without their own challenges. If South Africa can successfully navigate this crisis, it may set a precedent for other African countries in how to balance domestic policies with international pressures. The idea of sovereignty, particularly in relation to land and economic policies, is deeply embedded in the African Union's philosophy, but the challenge remains how to reconcile this with the global realities of trade agreements, investment flows, and diplomatic alliances, strategic economic partnerships, diversification away from the West. The key to South Africa's economic future may lie in its ability to diversify its strategic partnerships beyond the United States and Europe. While the U.S. remains an important economic partner, South Africa must explore alternatives that reduce its reliance on Western markets, which are becoming increasingly uncertain due to the ongoing tensions. This diversification can take several forms, from strengthening ties with China and Russia to engaging more deeply with African nations through regional agreements like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. The AfCFTA offers South Africa an opportunity to position itself as a leader in intra-African trade, which is expected to boost economic growth across the continent by reducing trade barriers and increasing access to regional markets. By strengthening its relationships within Africa, South Africa could become a linchpin in a continent-wide economic transformation, one that minimizes the risk posed by strained relations with traditional Western powers. Additionally, South Africa's deepening trade relations with China, India, and other emerging markets could present new avenues for growth. These countries have already become significant investors in Africa, and South Africa could leverage its natural resources, infrastructure, and industrial capabilities to foster closer economic ties with these regions. South Africa's role as a key player in the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa bloc could provide access to alternative sources of investment and trade, further cushioning the country against economic shocks. Land reform and social stability, a crucial balancing act. The question of land reform remains at the heart of the ongoing tensions between South Africa and the U.S. While the policy is widely supported within South Africa by those who see it as a means of correcting historical wrongs, the implementation of land reform without proper safeguards could have serious consequences for the country's social stability and economic future. A primary concern is the potential for land reform policies to result in further economic instability, particularly in agriculture, a sector that remains critical to South Africa's economy. Without a clear and fair process for redistributing land, the country risks exacerbating inequality rather than addressing it. Moreover, if land expropriation occurs without adequate compensation or alternative economic opportunities, it could lead to the displacement of farmers, loss of agricultural production, and an overall decrease in food security. At the same time, the success of land reform is also dependent on social and political cohesion. South Africa's history of apartheid has left deep divisions between racial and ethnic groups, and land reform could risk exacerbating these tensions if not handled sensitively. Figures like Julius Malema, with their radical rhetoric, have polarized the debate, casting the issue as a binary conflict between the oppressed black majority and the historically privileged white minority. While this framing resonates with many South Africans who seek justice and reparations, it also risks alienating those who view the process as unjust or as an incitement to violence. It is essential that South Africa's land reform efforts include mechanisms to foster national reconciliation and social cohesion. This could involve offering support to new landowners through skills development, financial assistance, and technical expertise, ensuring that land redistribution does not result in economic collapse or social fragmentation. Moreover, the government must ensure that the process is transparent, inclusive, and guided by the rule of law, which will help build trust among the various stakeholders. The role of international organizations and the UN. In the face of growing international criticism, South Africa must continue to engage with global institutions to strengthen its position and address concerns about its domestic policies. The United Nations, UN, and the African Union, AU, will play pivotal roles in supporting South Africa's land reform efforts, ensuring that the process remains consistent with international human rights standards and that South Africa's sovereignty is respected. The UN, particularly through bodies such as the UN Development Programme, UNDP, and the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, could offer expertise and support for South Africa's land reform process, providing technical assistance and helping to ensure that the policies are implemented in a manner that promotes food security and sustainable agricultural practices. Additionally, the African Union, which has been a staunch advocate for land reform and sovereignty, can offer moral and political support to South Africa as it navigates the diplomatic pressures from the West. On the other hand, the African Union must also ensure that South Africa's land reform policies do not create tensions within the region. Countries like Zimbabwe, which experienced its own controversial land reforms, may provide valuable lessons on the potential risks of poorly managed land expropriation. By working together with other African nations, South Africa can create a more coordinated approach to land reform that strengthens the continent's unity and ensures that land redistribution is equitable, sustainable, and peaceful. South Africa's strategic choices. As South Africa continues to face both domestic challenges and international scrutiny over its land reform policies, the country must choose its strategic path carefully. The outcome of this diplomatic crisis will have profound consequences not only for South Africa, but for Africa as a whole. South Africa's ability to maintain sovereignty, promote domestic reforms, and manage international relationships will determine its standing in the global order. By balancing domestic priorities with strategic diplomacy, engaging with emerging economies, and ensuring that land reform policies are fair and inclusive, South Africa has the potential to emerge from this crisis stronger and more resilient. The country's future will depend on its ability to navigate the complexities of global politics while remaining true to its goals of justice, equality, and economic empowerment. South Africa's internal challenges, institutional reform, and political stability. As the land reform debate continues to take center stage, South Africa must confront another crucial set of challenges: its own internal institutional reform. While the country has made strides in addressing historical injustices, the implementation of land reform and economic transformation is heavily reliant on the strength and integrity of its institutions. These institutions, including the judiciary, law enforcement, and public administration, play a critical role in ensuring that land reforms are carried out fairly and transparently. One of the key concerns is the need for a strong, independent judiciary that can enforce land redistribution policies in a manner that is both just and equitable. The risk of corruption, mismanagement, or politically motivated land seizures has been a significant issue in previous land reform attempts in other African countries. South Africa's judiciary must therefore be empowered to oversee land redistribution efforts and protect the rights of all parties involved. This includes ensuring that land expropriation does not result in undue harm to farmers, communities, or other stakeholders. Additionally, there is a need for robust administrative processes that can manage the complexity of land redistribution. Without effective land administration, efforts to redistribute land may falter due to bureaucratic inefficiencies, corruption, or insufficient support for new landowners. One potential solution is to invest in strengthening local governance structures and providing resources for land reform implementation at the municipal level. This decentralized approach could ensure that land reform policies are tailored to local needs and conditions, allowing for more effective and sustainable outcomes. The political stability of South Africa is also at stake. The ideological polarization that has surfaced between government officials, political parties, and various interest groups risks destabilizing the country's political landscape. As figures like Julius Malema continue to call for radical measures in the name of economic justice, the government must manage the tension between progressive demands for wealth redistribution and the need for social cohesion. South Africa must ensure that the political discourse remains constructive and that the country's leadership works to bring all sectors of society into the conversation about its future. A global perspective, economic and social rights. The international community continues to closely monitor South Africa's land reform process, not just because of the political and economic implications, but because the policy touches on broader issues of economic and social rights. Land ownership is deeply tied to the right to dignity, access to basic services, and economic opportunity. For millions of South Africans, access to land is essential for achieving economic independence and improving their standard of living. The challenge, however, lies in ensuring that land reforms benefit those who have historically been excluded from the country's wealth, without jeopardizing the livelihoods of others, particularly those from the white Afrikaner community. The international community, particularly Western nations and international human rights organizations, will be watching closely to ensure that land expropriation is carried out in compliance with international human rights standards. This includes the protection of property rights, the prevention of arbitrary confiscation, and the creation of frameworks to ensure that land redistribution leads to long-term economic empowerment rather than short-term political gains. Human rights groups have voiced concern that without careful management, South Africa's land reform efforts could inadvertently violate international human rights agreements, which could result in further diplomatic fallout and a loss of critical foreign aid and investment. At the same time, South Africa's efforts to address inequality and economic justice should also be framed within the broader context of Africa's development. Many African countries are grappling with similar challenges: how to balance economic growth with social equity, and how to empower historically disadvantaged groups without undermining national stability. South Africa's approach to land reform could serve as a model for other countries facing similar issues. If South Africa successfully navigates this complex issue, it could demonstrate that land reform is possible in a way that is just, sustainable, and economically beneficial. South Africa's place in global trade. Prospects. Beyond the immediate diplomatic and domestic challenges, South Africa's position in the global trade network is a central issue. The future of its relationship with the U.S. and other Western powers will have significant implications for its economic stability and future growth. In particular, The continuation of South Africa's access to preferential trade agreements, such as the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, will be a critical factor in shaping the nation's economic prospects. AGOA, which allows African countries to export goods to the U.S. duty-free, has been a valuable tool for promoting African exports and supporting economic growth across the continent. South Africa, with its diversified economy and strong industrial base, has been one of the primary beneficiaries of AGOA. However, tensions with the U.S., especially over land reform, could jeopardize this preferential access, potentially harming key sectors such as agriculture, textiles, and automotive production. As South Africa seeks to diversify its trade relationships, it may need to look beyond the US and Europe to emerging markets in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Strengthening ties with China, India, and other countries within the BRICS framework will be key in maintaining economic growth and reducing dependency on the West. Furthermore, engaging with regional trade agreements such as the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, can help South Africa tap into new markets within Africa and reduce its vulnerability to external political pressures. The future of South Africa's mining industry. One of South Africa's most significant economic assets is its mining sector, which has been a cornerstone of the country's economy for over a century. The recent interest from the Trump administration in South Africa's mining sector, particularly in relation to energy transformation and renewable resources, underscores the importance of this industry in shaping South Africa's future. However, while South Africa remains a key player in global mining, its industry faces several challenges, including political instability, environmental concerns, and global market fluctuations. To remain competitive, South Africa must continue to modernize its mining industry, adopting new technologies and practices that can reduce environmental harm while increasing productivity. The country's mining sector must also prioritize sustainable development to ensure that its resources are utilized efficiently and that the benefits of mining are shared equitably across all segments of society. Given the increasing demand for minerals needed for renewable energy technologies, such as lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements, South Africa's mining industry could play a crucial role in the global shift toward cleaner energy. However, the country will need to navigate the complexities of managing its natural resources sustainably, ensuring that both economic and environmental goals are met. A crucial period for South Africa. South Africa is at a pivotal moment in its history. The land reform debate, its strained diplomatic relations with the U.S., and the broader geopolitical dynamics affecting the continent and the world at large place South Africa at the crossroads of economic, social, and political transformation. The country's ability to address its internal challenges, such as corruption, land inequality, and unemployment, while maintaining its position in the global economy, will determine whether it can emerge from this period stronger and more resilient. The stakes are high, not only for South Africa but for the entire African continent. If South Africa can successfully balance its domestic goals with its international obligations, it could become a model for how African countries can assert their sovereignty while engaging with the global community in ways that benefit their citizens. However, if tensions with Western powers escalate further, and if land reform is poorly executed, the country risks further polarization and economic instability. In the end, the outcome of this crisis will shape not only South Africa's future, but also the broader trajectory of African development in the 21st century. The lessons learned from South Africa's experience will resonate throughout the continent, guiding other nations as they navigate the complex challenges of land reform, economic growth, and international diplomacy. South Africa's role in regional security, managing internal strain and external pressures. Beyond the economic and diplomatic challenges, South Africa's security landscape is an essential factor that will influence the outcomes of the land reform debate and the broader political situation. As one of the most powerful military forces on the African continent, South Africa plays a critical role in regional peacekeeping and stability. However, the internal divisions that have surfaced over land reform, as well as the socio-political polarization that has emerged between different ethnic groups, present significant challenges to the country's internal security. Historically, South Africa has been a leader in African peacekeeping efforts, particularly through its involvement in the African Union's peace and security initiatives. The country has contributed troops to conflict zones in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, Sudan, and the Central African Republic, CAR. Yet, as internal divisions deepen, particularly around contentious issues like land reform, the country may face increasing difficulty in maintaining its leadership role in regional security. Any significant internal instability could potentially undermine South Africa's ability to continue providing peacekeeping support to its neighbors, making it less effective in promoting regional stability. Additionally, the country's internal security forces must be prepared for potential social unrest, stemming from the growing discontent over economic inequality and the pace of land reform. While the majority of South Africans support land redistribution, the manner in which these policies are implemented could lead to protests, clashes, or even violence, especially if groups feel that they are being left out of the process. For instance, disgruntled white farmers, as well as non-white landless South Africans, could organize mass protests that escalate into violent confrontations. The South African government must therefore strengthen its internal security apparatus to prevent the escalation of social unrest. This will involve ensuring that law enforcement agencies are equipped to handle large-scale protests and potential civil disobedience while also respecting human rights. Maintaining a balance between ensuring public order and safeguarding citizens' rights will be a delicate challenge for the government, particularly in a polarized environment. The path forward: South Africa's leadership in economic transformation. While the challenges South Africa faces are significant, there are numerous opportunities for the country to lead in the economic transformation of Africa. As the most industrialized economy on the continent, South Africa has the capacity to become a beacon of progress and reform in Africa, especially in the areas of inclusive growth and development. However, for South Africa to succeed, it must move beyond traditional sectors like mining and agriculture and begin diversifying its economy to meet the demands of a rapidly changing global market. South Africa's future economic growth may hinge on the country's ability to harness new technologies, particularly in the fields of renewable energy, information technology, and advanced manufacturing. The global shift toward green energy and sustainability presents a unique opportunity for South Africa to become a leader in the African renewable energy sector. The country's vast solar and wind resources could position it as a regional hub for green energy production, and it could attract international investments focused on renewable infrastructure. Moreover, South Africa has the potential to lead the way in digital innovation and technology development. By investing in the digital economy, South Africa could create new jobs, foster entrepreneurship, and build a sustainable knowledge-based economy that is less reliant on the volatile global commodities market. This diversification would not only help address unemployment and poverty, but also strengthen South Africa's global position by aligning itself with key technological advancements. However, the success of these efforts will depend on the government's ability to implement policies that support education and skills development in emerging sectors. South Africa's education system, particularly in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, must be reformed to provide young South Africans with the tools needed to compete in the global economy. Without a focus on skills development and innovation, the country risks falling behind in a rapidly changing world. A unified approach, bridging the gap between rich and poor. At the heart of South Africa's land reform issue lies a deep social and economic divide that has its roots in apartheid-era policies. While the majority of South Africans support the redistribution of land to correct these historical wrongs, the challenge is in finding a way to bridge the gap between the country's wealthy and poor. The wealthy, particularly those who are descendants of white Afrikaners and colonial elites, have access to significant land holdings and economic resources, while the majority of Black South Africans live in poverty with limited access to land or resources. The wealth inequality in South Africa is one of the highest in the world, with a small percentage of the population controlling a disproportionate share of the country's wealth. Addressing this inequality is critical to achieving long-term social stability and ensuring that the benefits of economic growth are shared by all South Africans. The current land reform debate is not just about land ownership. It is about achieving a more equitable distribution of wealth and ensuring that all South Africans have access to the resources needed to improve their lives. To achieve this, South Africa's land reform policies must be complemented by broader economic reforms that focus on wealth redistribution. This includes policies that promote access to education, healthcare, and housing for the poor, as well as initiatives to improve job creation and economic mobility. If South Africa can implement comprehensive economic reforms that address the needs of its poor and marginalized communities, it could pave the way for greater social cohesion and political stability. Additionally, it will be essential for South Africa to engage with the international community and its African neighbors in a way that fosters cooperation and shared prosperity. Through regional economic integration and cross-border partnerships, South Africa can help lead the African continent toward a more inclusive and sustainable future. The role of public participation, inclusivity in land reform. One of the most critical factors for the success of South Africa's land reform program will be public participation. For land reform to be truly transformative, it must be inclusive, ensuring that all affected groups have a voice in the process. This means involving not only political leaders and policymakers, but also local communities, civil society organizations, and landowners in the discussions surrounding land redistribution. Public participation will help ensure that the needs and concerns of local communities are taken into account during the implementation of land reform policies. Additionally, engaging with various stakeholders will help build trust in the process and reduce the risk of conflict or misunderstanding. By encouraging dialogue between different groups, South Africa can create a more collaborative and effective approach to land reform that is grounded in the realities of local communities. Involving women, youth, and rural communities in land reform decisions will also be crucial, as these groups are often the most marginalized in the land distribution process. Ensuring that women have access to land ownership and control is especially important for achieving gender equality and fostering economic empowerment at the grassroots level. Women's access to land has been shown to improve food security, health outcomes, and economic stability in communities, making it a critical component of South Africa's broader economic strategy. South Africa's future challenges and opportunities. South Africa stands at a crossroads. The outcome of its land reform debate, its economic transformation, and its ability to manage diplomatic tensions with the U.S. will determine its future trajectory. The country's leadership will need to navigate a delicate balance between addressing historical injustices and ensuring economic stability for all its citizens. While the challenges are significant, South Africa's potential for growth and leadership remains high. If South Africa can successfully implement its land reform program, foster inclusive economic growth, and maintain its position as a regional leader, it will emerge as a stronger and more resilient nation. However, this will require a commitment to transparency, social justice, and political stability, as well as a willingness to engage with both domestic and international partners to achieve common goals. For the broader African continent, South Africa's success or failure in this process will serve as a bellwether for other nations seeking to balance land reform with economic growth and international diplomacy. The stakes are high, and the path forward is fraught with challenges, but South Africa's ability to rise above these obstacles could shape the future of Africa for generations to come. The role of African leadership in solidarity and cooperation. As South Africa tackles its internal and external challenges, the role of broader African leadership in fostering solidarity and cooperation is paramount. Given South Africa's prominence on the continent, its actions regarding land reform and economic justice have a ripple effect on neighboring nations. South Africa must not only focus on its domestic policies, but also take on the responsibility of leading through example and ensuring that its journey toward land reform and economic empowerment does not become a divisive force in Africa, but rather a catalyst for positive change. The African Union, AU, as the continent's leading multilateral organization, is in a strong position to facilitate collaboration and offer support to South Africa in navigating these tensions. The AU's role could be instrumental in providing diplomatic channels for South Africa to engage with Western countries, especially in light of tensions surrounding land reform. At the same time, the AU can offer solidarity with South Africa's sovereignty, emphasizing the importance of African nations owning their developmental paths without undue external interference. African countries with similar land reform initiatives, such as Zimbabwe and Namibia, can offer valuable insights based on their own experiences. While Zimbabwe's land expropriation policies in the early 2000s were widely criticized for their chaotic implementation, the country's experiences could still provide lessons on the importance of clear frameworks, phased implementation, and the consideration of broader economic reforms alongside land redistribution. By fostering an exchange of ideas and strategies, African countries can strengthen their collective approach to land reform, ensuring that the process benefits all Africans without deepening social divisions. Further, regional economic bodies like the Southern African Development Community, SADC, can play a critical role in supporting South Africa's policies by advocating for peaceful dialogue, constructive diplomacy, and shared economic prosperity. Through such platforms, South Africa can garner the support needed to weather external diplomatic pressures, such as those from the U.S., while continuing to champion a more equitable land distribution model. Additionally, South Africa's leadership in the SADC provides it with the opportunity to bolster regional economic integration, which is crucial for advancing broader goals of sustainable development and poverty reduction. Navigating a changing global landscape. The international landscape surrounding South Africa is rapidly evolving, and the country's position on the global stage is increasingly influenced by shifts in geopolitics. As global power dynamics change, South Africa must adapt its foreign policy strategies to reflect new opportunities and challenges. In recent years, the growing influence of China, India, and other emerging economies has shifted the balance of power away from traditional Western dominance. As a member of the BRICS group, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa can leverage its position to strengthen ties with these rising powers, which are often more sympathetic to the needs and priorities of the global South. China, in particular, has become a significant economic partner for many African countries, and South Africa is no exception. China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, offers a unique opportunity for South Africa to access infrastructure financing, particularly for energy, transport, and technology sectors. South Africa can benefit from these partnerships by attracting investment in renewable energy projects, digital infrastructure, and manufacturing, all of which can contribute to the country's long-term economic diversification. However, South Africa must also be cautious not to overdepend on one single economic partner. While China and India offer promising growth opportunities, the diversification of South Africa's trade partners will be essential to maintaining a balanced, resilient economy. Establishing stronger trade relations with other African nations, particularly those within the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, will help mitigate the risks of reliance on any single international partner. South Africa's relationship with the European Union, EU, and the United States is also vital, but as seen with the recent tensions surrounding land reform, these relationships are becoming more strained. To manage this, South Africa must position itself as a leader in advocating for more equitable global trade and economic practices, particularly in terms of the African Development Agenda. By emphasizing the principles of fairness, equity, and shared prosperity, South Africa can demonstrate that African nations should be partners on the global stage rather than subjects of external agendas, strengthening the role of women and youth in economic transformation. One of the most significant challenges facing South Africa, and Africa as a whole, is the underrepresentation of women and youth in economic development. The future of South Africa's economic transformation will depend on how effectively it can integrate these groups into the broader narrative of growth and prosperity. The country's land reform policy offers an opportunity to address gender inequality by ensuring that women have equal access to land and resources. In many African societies, women play a central role in agriculture, yet they often face significant barriers to land ownership and control. For South Africa's land reform policies to succeed, they must prioritize gender equity, ensuring that women have access to land, the ability to make decisions about its use, and the resources to build sustainable livelihoods. By doing so, South Africa will not only create a more inclusive economy, but also foster greater social stability, as women's empowerment is directly linked to improvements in health, education, and family well-being. Similarly, South Africa's youth must be empowered to take part in the economic transformation of the country. The high levels of unemployment among young South Africans represent both a challenge and an opportunity. By offering young people access to land, education, and training in emerging sectors such as technology, renewable energy, and digital entrepreneurship, South Africa can create a more dynamic and innovative economy. Providing young South Africans with the skills and resources to succeed will not only reduce unemployment, but also help foster a sense of national unity and social cohesion. The government, in collaboration with the private sector and civil society, must develop targeted programs aimed at increasing youth and women's participation in agriculture, entrepreneurship, and other key sectors of the economy. These initiatives can offer mentorship, financial support, and training to ensure that South Africa's land reform program is inclusive and sustainable in the long term. International legal frameworks, ensuring fair land reform. One of the challenges that South Africa faces in its land reform process is ensuring that the redistribution of land is legally sound and consistent with international law. While the South African government has made it clear that land reform is a matter of domestic policy, there is increasing pressure from international bodies to ensure that the process is fair, transparent, and in line with global human rights standards. South Africa must work to balance its sovereignty in deciding how land is distributed with its obligations to international legal frameworks, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. International human rights organizations, including the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, have stressed the importance of upholding property rights while addressing historical injustices. South Africa's land reform policies must not only meet the needs of the country's marginalized communities, but also comply with global legal norms that protect the rights of property owners, regardless of race or ethnicity. Ensuring that land expropriation is done in a fair and transparent manner, with due process and compensation where appropriate, will help safeguard South Africa from potential legal challenges and international backlash. The road ahead for South Africa stands at a critical juncture in its history, facing a complex array of challenges that could determine its future. The successful implementation of land reform, coupled with economic diversification, social inclusion, and global engagement, will be essential for the country to realize its full potential. As a leader in Africa, South Africa's actions will reverberate throughout the continent, influencing the trajectory of other African nations as they grapple with similar issues of inequality, land ownership, and economic justice. Navigating these challenges will require careful diplomacy, a commitment to inclusive growth, and a willingness to embrace global partnerships. The future of South Africa depends on its ability to lead with a vision of equitable development that uplifts all of its citizens, fosters social cohesion, and establishes the country as a respected and influential player on the global stage. The road ahead is difficult, but South Africa's potential remains immense. By embracing a forward-thinking approach to governance and engaging with both domestic and international stakeholders, the country can overcome its challenges and set an example for the rest of Africa and the world. Economic resilience. South Africa's path to recovery. For South Africa, the road to economic recovery is deeply intertwined with the successful execution of its land reform policies and its ability to diversify its economy. With a large portion of its economic foundation historically reliant on mining, agriculture, and the industrial sectors, the need for diversification has become more pressing than ever. South Africa cannot afford to rely solely on traditional sectors, especially when global markets are evolving rapidly due to technological advancements, sustainability initiatives, and shifting consumer demands. While South Africa's mining sector remains vital to its economy, there is significant potential for growth in sectors such as renewable energy, agriculture, technology, and services. The country's vast natural resources, including abundant sunlight and wind, make it an ideal candidate to become a regional leader in green energy. This could open new doors for innovation in renewable energy projects, like solar power and wind energy, positioning South Africa as a hub for sustainable energy solutions in Africa. For South Africa to successfully transition to a greener economy, it will need to focus on developing renewable energy infrastructure, offering incentives to local and foreign investors, and creating policies that encourage the growth of clean energy technologies. Collaborating with international organizations and emerging economies that prioritize environmental sustainability could help unlock new funding sources and partnerships, particularly in the form of foreign direct investment, FDI. However, the transformation towards a more diversified economy will not be without its challenges. The government must address key structural weaknesses within the economy, such as high levels of unemployment, especially among young people, and the slow pace of labor market reform. The focus must also shift to ensuring that small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, are supported and empowered to thrive, given their potential to create jobs, reduce poverty, and contribute to economic diversification. Sectors like technology and innovation have the potential to drive job creation and entrepreneurship. With the digital economy expanding globally, South Africa can harness its skilled workforce to become a leading player in tech development, offering homegrown solutions for Africa's unique challenges. By building a robust tech ecosystem and attracting global talent, South Africa can increase its competitiveness in the global economy while addressing domestic issues of poverty and job creation. A unified national vision, building consensus for land reform. While land reform is a critical issue in South Africa, it is equally essential that the country builds a broad consensus on its path forward. The success of any land reform program depends not only on policy, but on the unity of the nation. For land reform to be truly transformative, South Africa must engage in an open and transparent dialogue involving all stakeholders, including political parties, civil society, business leaders, and community representatives. This dialogue must be structured in such a way that it balances the interests of different groups and fosters understanding and collaboration. The government should prioritize inclusivity in this process, ensuring that marginalized groups, particularly women, rural communities, and youth, have a seat at the table. Without this inclusiveness, land reform risks exacerbating existing inequalities or fostering resentment, particularly if those who have been historically disadvantaged are not adequately represented or empowered. One of the key challenges South Africa faces is ensuring that land reform is equitable and sustainable. Land redistribution should not only focus on the physical allocation of land, but also address the broader economic issues that often accompany land ownership. This includes access to financing, support for sustainable farming practices, and the provision of education and training to help new landowners succeed. Land reform must be part of a comprehensive strategy that includes social services, infrastructure development, and access to markets for small farmers. Furthermore, South Africa's political leadership must unite around the idea that land reform is not about sowing division or creating further antagonism, but about healing past wounds and creating a fairer, more prosperous society. To this end, it is important that South Africa's political leaders work to combat divisive rhetoric and foster an atmosphere of national unity. This will require patience, open communication, and a commitment to dialogue, as well as a deep understanding of the long-term goals of land reform. International partnerships, leveraging global support for development. As South Africa navigates its land reform policies and seeks to strengthen its economy, it is essential that the country seeks international partnerships that support its development goals. Although tensions with the U.S. over land reform have been significant, South Africa can still find common ground with international partners who are committed to supporting Africa's economic and social development. Global partnerships could include collaborations with multilateral organizations, including the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, IMF, and various non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that focus on land rights, development, and poverty alleviation. These organizations can offer valuable expertise and financial support for South Africa's land reform initiatives, as well as provide guidance on how to structure policies in a way that maximizes benefits for all South Africans, particularly the most vulnerable. Additionally, South Africa's relationship with the European Union, EU, can be strengthened through trade partnerships that focus on shared values, such as sustainability, human rights, and social inclusion. While recent tensions may complicate these relations, South Africa can still leverage its standing in the global economy to foster constructive dialogue with European nations, particularly in areas such as trade, investment, and environmental protection. By prioritizing mutually beneficial relationships, South Africa can ensure that international support continues, even in the face of political and diplomatic disagreements. Moreover, South Africa can tap into emerging markets for additional investment and development partnerships. Countries like China, India, and Brazil are increasingly becoming important players in Africa's development, and South Africa can benefit from these relationships by engaging in initiatives that promote sustainable growth and economic development. Through the BRICS framework, South Africa has the opportunity to shape a global economic agenda that prioritizes the needs of the global South, focusing on inclusive development, equitable trade practices, and sustainable growth. The power of African innovation, unlocking potential through creativity. Africa is home to a vibrant and growing creative economy, one that has the potential to revolutionize industries, promote cultural exchange, and drive sustainable development. South Africa, with its diverse cultural heritage, has a unique opportunity to become a leader in Africa's creative industries, including fashion, music, film, art, and technology. The rise of African creativity on the global stage has already been witnessed through South Africa's prominent role in the global entertainment industry, with its film, music, and fashion sectors gaining international recognition. To unlock the full potential of Africa's creative economy, South Africa must invest in infrastructure, training, and support systems that nurture young talent and encourage entrepreneurship. South Africa has the potential to create a thriving ecosystem for creative industries that not only celebrates African culture, but also generates jobs, stimulates economic growth, and fosters innovation. By encouraging the growth of digital platforms, incubators for startups, and partnerships between creative professionals and industries, South Africa can harness the power of its people's creativity to drive economic transformation and enhance its position on the global stage. Moving towards a unified future. South Africa's land reform policies and broader economic transformation efforts are part of a larger, ongoing journey toward creating a more equitable society. While challenges remain, the country has a unique opportunity to use these reforms as a springboard for broader national healing, economic growth, and social inclusion. Through strong leadership, regional and international cooperation, and a commitment to inclusive and sustainable development, South Africa can rise above its challenges and set an example for the rest of the African continent. By leveraging its unique position as a regional power and global player, South Africa can continue to shape the future of the African continent, advocating for sovereignty, equity, and shared prosperity for all Africans. The road ahead will not be easy, but the stakes are high, and the potential for growth is immense. South Africa's ability to lead with vision, compassion, and commitment to justice will determine not only its own future, but also the future of Africa as a whole. South Africa's role in global climate leadership. As the world grapples with the realities of climate change, South Africa finds itself in a pivotal position. The country, with its abundant natural resources and vast landscape, is both a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and a vulnerable target of climate change's effects. Given this dual reality, South Africa's role in global climate leadership will be central to its future economic and environmental trajectory. South Africa is already taking steps toward a greener economy, with initiatives such as the Integrated Resource Plan, IRP, aiming to diversify its energy mix and reduce dependence on coal. The country has committed to reducing its carbon emissions under the Paris Agreement and has made strides in developing renewable energy projects, particularly in solar and wind energy. However, despite these advancements, South Africa remains one of the world's largest emitters of carbon dioxide due to its reliance on coal-fired power plants. For South Africa to fulfill its potential as a leader in global climate solutions, it will need to accelerate the transition to renewable energy and adopt a more sustainable development model. This requires both domestic reforms and international collaboration. South Africa can leverage its position within international climate negotiations, such as those under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, to advocate for greater support for developing nations in mitigating and adapting to climate change. By aligning itself with countries and coalitions that prioritize climate action, such as the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, South Africa can secure funding and technical support for its green initiatives. Furthermore, through the African Union, AU, South Africa can push for a collective African response to climate change, ensuring that the continent's unique needs and challenges are addressed in global climate policy frameworks. South Africa's transition to a low-carbon economy will not only benefit the environment, but also provide new economic opportunities. The renewable energy sector is expected to grow rapidly, creating jobs, stimulating innovation, and attracting international investment. By fostering a green economy, South Africa can become a regional leader in sustainable development, positioning itself as a hub for clean energy technologies and green innovation across Africa. Strengthening South Africa's global diplomatic influence. South Africa's diplomatic approach will also play a central role in navigating its economic and political challenges. As a member of the G20, BRICS, the African Union, and other international bodies, South Africa has a strong platform from which to assert its influence. The country's diplomatic strategy must strike a balance between defending its sovereignty, particularly regarding land reform, and leveraging its position to promote economic growth and regional stability. A key aspect of South Africa's diplomatic agenda will be to continue fostering positive relationships with African countries. The African Union's emphasis on unity and cooperation provides South Africa with an opportunity to strengthen its leadership role on the continent. South Africa's role in regional peacekeeping, mediation, and conflict resolution must be maintained and expanded to ensure that the country remains a stabilizing force in Africa. South Africa must also navigate its relationships with global powers, balancing its traditional ties with the West, particularly the U.S. and the European Union, with its growing partnerships with emerging economies like China and India. While tensions with the U.S. may arise due to land reform, South Africa should continue engaging diplomatically to resolve issues and find common ground on key global challenges such as trade, climate change, and security. For example, South Africa could use its leadership in multilateral institutions like the UN to advocate for greater support for developing countries in areas like technology transfer, climate finance, and international trade reforms. South Africa's diplomatic engagements should focus on promoting policies that advance the collective development of the global South while safeguarding the country's own interests. By remaining an active participant in global dialogue, South Africa can secure both economic growth and diplomatic influence, strengthening its position as a key player in international affairs. Building resilient institutions. The foundation for sustainable growth. A crucial element of South Africa's long-term success will be the strengthening of its institutions. Effective, transparent, and accountable institutions are the foundation for sustainable growth and development. the land reform debate underscores the need for institutions that can effectively manage policy implementation, mediate conflicts, and ensure the fair distribution of resources. South Africa must focus on reinforcing the integrity of its public institutions, from land administration bodies to local governments, to ensure that land reforms are carried out fairly, efficiently, and without corruption. The country's efforts to address corruption and improve governance will be critical for building investor confidence and ensuring that economic policies are implemented effectively. An important area for institutional reform is the judiciary. South Africa's legal system must be empowered to handle land disputes and ensure that the rights of all citizens, regardless of race or ethnicity, are protected. Strengthening the judiciary will also be crucial in upholding the rule of law and guaranteeing that land expropriation is carried out in compliance with constitutional and international standards. Furthermore, South Africa must focus on fostering political stability by strengthening democratic institutions. The country's political landscape is complex, and the increasing polarization around land reform and economic policies presents a challenge to social cohesion. To ensure stability, South Africa must work to improve political dialogue, avoid inflammatory rhetoric, and promote inclusivity in policymaking. Civic engagement, particularly among youth and marginalized communities, should be encouraged to ensure that the policies being implemented reflect the needs and aspirations of all South Africans, promoting education and innovation for future generations. Another key to South Africa's future success is its ability to invest in the education and innovation sectors. Education is the cornerstone of economic and social mobility, and it will be essential for South Africa to invest in the next generation of leaders, entrepreneurs, and skilled workers. The country's education system must evolve to meet the needs of a modern, globalized economy, particularly in fields such as technology, renewable energy, and entrepreneurship. The government must focus on ensuring that educational opportunities are equitable and accessible, particularly for disadvantaged communities. This includes improving access to quality primary and secondary education, as well as expanding vocational and technical training programs to equip young South Africans with the skills needed in emerging industries. South Africa must also encourage lifelong learning to ensure that its workforce remains adaptable in an ever-changing global economy. In addition to improving formal education, South Africa must also foster a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. The country has a wealth of talent and creativity, particularly among its youth, who have the potential to drive economic transformation through startups and technological innovation. To unlock this potential, South Africa must invest in entrepreneurship programs, incubators, and access to finance for young entrepreneurs. Collaboration between universities, private companies, and government agencies can help create an ecosystem that nurtures innovation and supports the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. By focusing on education and innovation, South Africa can build a knowledge-based economy that can compete in the global marketplace. The country's youth must be empowered to play a central role in shaping the nation's future, driving both social and economic progress. South Africa's future path. The challenges facing South Africa are undeniable, but so too are the opportunities. By embracing a comprehensive approach to land reform, economic diversification, education, and innovation, South Africa can transform its society and economy into a model of sustainable development and social equity. The country's leadership, both domestically and internationally, will be critical in charting this path forward. South Africa has the potential to lead not only Africa, but also the global South in advocating for equitable economic development, sustainable growth, and climate action. By leveraging its position within international institutions, fostering regional cooperation, and empowering its citizens through inclusive policies, South Africa can set an example for the world to follow. While the road ahead may be fraught with challenges, South Africa's ability to innovate, adapt, and lead will ultimately determine its future success. As the nation continues its journey of transformation, it must remain committed to the principles of justice, equality, and shared prosperity for all its people. The importance of South Africa's role in African development. As South Africa strives to overcome its domestic challenges and chart a course for long-term prosperity, its role in broader African development remains critical. With its well-developed infrastructure, industrial base, and robust financial systems, South Africa has the capacity to drive regional integration and economic growth across the continent. The success of South Africa's land reform, economic diversification, and environmental sustainability efforts will have far-reaching implications for the African continent, as the country is viewed as a model for other African nations grappling with similar issues of inequality, land reform, and sustainable development. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, presents a powerful platform for South Africa to take the lead in promoting intra-African trade and economic cooperation. South Africa's strategic location and access to key ports and resources make it an essential trade hub for the continent. Through AfCFTA, South Africa has the potential to contribute significantly to the reduction of trade barriers across the continent, facilitating the movement of goods, services, and people. This will be particularly important in supporting the development of Africa's most underserved regions, where access to global markets remains limited. Additionally, South Africa's leadership in climate change mitigation, renewable energy development, and sustainable agriculture could provide a model for other African nations that are facing similar challenges due to climate change. The African Union, with South Africa at the helm, could take stronger steps in advocating for more robust support from developed countries to help Africa mitigate the effects of climate change. This would require stronger diplomatic engagement, particularly at international climate forums, ensuring that Africa's needs are prioritized in the global climate agenda. South Africa's leadership in promoting African unity will be crucial for fostering a sense of shared purpose across the continent. The Pan-African vision of a united and prosperous Africa is an aspiration that can only be achieved through greater cooperation between nations. South Africa's ability to promote regional integration and encourage collaboration among African states will be fundamental in shaping the future of the continent. Addressing the youth unemployment crisis, a path to social stability. One of the most pressing challenges for South Africa is its high youth unemployment rate, which stands at an alarming level, exacerbating the country's socio-economic inequality. A significant portion of the country's youth, especially those in rural and underdeveloped areas, remain disconnected from the formal economy, with limited access to job opportunities and vocational training. This social challenge threatens to further destabilize South Africa's political landscape, as young people, disillusioned by a lack of economic prospects, become more susceptible to radicalization and social unrest. Addressing youth unemployment must be a priority for the South African government. Creating opportunities for young people to engage in productive economic activities will require comprehensive reforms, including the expansion of vocational education and technical training programs, as well as initiatives that support youth entrepreneurship. The government should partner with the private sector and civil society to create a diverse range of career pathways for young South Africans, particularly in sectors like technology, green energy, and digital services, where demand is growing globally. Furthermore, young people must be equipped with the skills to thrive in a rapidly changing economy. South Africa's education system, though relatively advanced in comparison to many African nations, still faces significant barriers in terms of accessibility and quality. Reforms in the education sector are necessary to improve both the quality and relevance of education, ensuring that young South Africans are prepared for the workforce of the future. Expanding access to online education and training programs could also help bridge the skills gap, especially for those in rural areas who have limited access to traditional educational institutions. The involvement of the private sector is also critical in addressing youth unemployment. Corporate South Africa can play a pivotal role in job creation by investing in internships, apprenticeships, and graduate programs, which provide hands-on experience and a pathway to permanent employment. Public-private partnerships in the tech industry, renewable energy sector, and infrastructure projects can create job opportunities for young South Africans while contributing to the overall development of the country. Strengthening South Africa's financial sector, a pillar for growth. South Africa's financial sector is one of the most sophisticated in Africa, with a well-established banking system, a strong stock exchange, and a robust regulatory framework. However, despite these advantages, the country faces challenges in ensuring that its financial sector works for all South Africans, particularly those who remain excluded from formal financial services. To stimulate inclusive economic growth, South Africa must focus on improving access to financial services for underserved populations, particularly in rural areas. This includes expanding access to affordable credit, savings accounts, and insurance products that can help individuals and small businesses grow. Digital financial services, such as mobile banking and mobile money platforms, have already shown promise in bridging the gap between the formal financial system and underserved communities. South Africa can further leverage its advanced digital infrastructure to create financial solutions that are accessible and affordable for all. Moreover, South Africa's financial institutions can play a crucial role in financing the country's green transition. Banks and investors should be encouraged to prioritize funding for sustainable projects, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, and climate resilience. Green bonds, sustainable investment funds, and impact investing can provide a critical source of capital for projects that contribute to South Africa's climate goals while also driving economic growth. By promoting sustainable financial practices, South Africa can align its financial sector with the country's broader development objectives. South Africa should also explore opportunities to enhance its financial ties with other African nations, particularly through initiatives such as regional banking and cross-border financial services. This would not only improve access to capital for businesses across the continent, but also help facilitate trade and investment flows within the African continent. The need for regional infrastructure development. South Africa's future prosperity is inextricably linked to regional infrastructure development. A modern and interconnected transportation network, robust energy systems, and advanced communication infrastructure are essential for the country's growth and its role in African integration. South Africa, with its well-established infrastructure, is well-positioned to lead regional initiatives aimed at improving connectivity within Southern Africa and beyond. Infrastructure projects that link South Africa with neighboring countries, such as railways, highways, and energy pipelines, will promote greater economic integration and facilitate the movement of goods, services, and people across borders. These projects will not only benefit South Africa's economy, but also support the development of neighboring countries, contributing to overall regional stability and growth. Investing in renewable energy infrastructure is also key to addressing the energy needs of the region. South Africa's potential to produce solar and wind energy presents an opportunity for the country to lead in energy innovation and export renewable power to neighboring countries. By expanding regional power grids and increasing investment in energy storage technologies, South Africa can help stabilize energy access across Southern Africa while reducing reliance on fossil fuels. As part of the African Union's Agenda 2063, South Africa can play a leadership role in advancing the Pan-African infrastructure development agenda. By prioritizing regional infrastructure projects, South Africa can strengthen its position as a continental leader, helping to drive the economic and social transformation of Africa. Building a vision for a stronger South Africa. South Africa's path forward will not be without challenges, but the country's potential to overcome these obstacles and emerge stronger remains immense. The successful implementation of land reform, the diversification of its economy, the expansion of renewable energy, and the creation of jobs for its youth will all be pivotal in shaping the future of South Africa. By fostering political unity, strengthening institutions, investing in education and innovation, and positioning itself as a regional and global leader, South Africa can build a more prosperous and sustainable future for all its people. As the country continues to play a central role in Africa's development, its ability to lead by example and advocate for inclusive, equitable growth will be crucial in shaping the trajectory of the continent. South Africa's leadership will continue to be vital not only for its own future, but for the future of Africa as a whole. By embracing a forward-thinking, inclusive approach to development, South Africa can provide a model for other nations seeking to balance economic growth, social equity, and environmental sustainability. The road ahead will require collaboration, innovation, and strong leadership. But South Africa's resilience and commitment to transformation will be key to unlocking its full potential. The role of innovation and technology in South Africa's economic revival. In an increasingly digital world, South Africa must embrace technological innovation as a cornerstone of its economic revival. The rapid rise of artificial intelligence, AI, automation, and digital services presents South Africa with both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, embracing these technologies can help modernize industries, improve efficiency, and create new jobs in emerging sectors. On the other hand, there are concerns about job displacement due to automation and the digital divide that could exclude marginalized communities from these advancements. South Africa must develop strategies to leverage innovation while ensuring that its workforce is prepared for the digital economy. This includes expanding access to technology in schools, investing in digital literacy programs for adults, and creating public-private partnerships to drive technological research and development. By positioning itself as a hub for technology and innovation in Africa, South Africa can attract international investments, boost its competitiveness, and foster new industries that will drive sustainable growth. Moreover, the role of South Africa's universities and research institutions in advancing technological solutions cannot be overstated. These institutions are well positioned to collaborate with the private sector to generate cutting-edge solutions in fields such as biotechnology, renewable energy, and agritech. By supporting innovation and fostering entrepreneurship, South Africa can develop homegrown solutions that not only address its own challenges, but also contribute to the broader African continent's development. A commitment to strong governance and transparency. Strong, transparent governance is essential to South Africa's long-term stability. The country must continue to fight corruption and strengthen its democratic institutions, ensuring that government policies are implemented effectively and equitably. South Africa's progress on land reform and economic transformation will depend on the strength of its public sector institutions and the confidence the people have in their government. The country's anti-corruption efforts must be supported by robust legal frameworks, accountability mechanisms, and a vibrant civil society that holds leaders to account. Strengthening the capacity of the state to deliver essential services, from healthcare to education and infrastructure, is critical for improving the lives of ordinary citizens. It will also boost investor confidence and create an environment conducive to economic growth. South Africa can serve as a model for other African nations, demonstrating how democracy and governance can drive prosperity, even in the face of complex historical challenges. The government must continue its efforts to build an inclusive and transparent governance framework that prioritizes the welfare of all citizens, especially the marginalized and disadvantaged. Advancing Pan-Africanism, Lessons for African Leaders. South Africa's path forward holds important lessons not just for the country, but for the entire African continent. As the continent continues to navigate complex issues of poverty, inequality, and development, the role of leadership will be critical in shaping Africa's future. The journey South Africa embarks on in land reform, economic diversification, and environmental sustainability offers valuable insights that other African leaders can learn from. For African leaders, the key message is clear. Transformation requires bold leadership, long-term vision, and an unwavering commitment to inclusivity and fairness. It is essential that African leaders invest in education, innovation, and infrastructure to prepare their nations for the challenges of the future. The focus should be on building resilient economies, strong institutions, and social cohesion. This will require collaboration, not just within countries, but also across the continent. African leaders must be united in their efforts to promote regional integration, economic cooperation, and shared prosperity. As South Africa demonstrates, Economic transformation must be inclusive, addressing the needs of the most vulnerable communities and ensuring that the benefits of growth are widely shared. African leaders must prioritize policies that foster equal access to resources, opportunities, and services for all their citizens, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic background. Furthermore, Africa's future will depend on the continent's ability to mitigate the effects of climate change. Leaders must act urgently to transition to green economies, invest in renewable energy, and protect Africa's natural resources for future generations. Global climate action and sustainable development should be central to every African nation's policy agenda. Advice to African leaders. African leaders are faced with unprecedented challenges, but also with immense opportunities. To achieve sustainable development and peace, African leaders must prioritize 1. Investing in education and skills. Development. Empowering young people and equipping them with the skills needed for the future economy is essential for achieving inclusive growth and reducing inequality. 2. Fostering innovation and technology. Africa must embrace the digital economy and encourage the development of new technologies that can improve productivity, create jobs, and provide solutions to the continent's unique challenges. 3. Strengthening governance and accountability. Transparent governance, free from corruption, is the foundation of economic and political stability. African leaders must ensure that their governments serve the people and promote the common good. 4. Building strong regional cooperation. Africa's economic integration through initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, is vital for unlocking the continent's full potential. Leaders must work together to reduce barriers to trade, improve infrastructure, and promote collective economic growth. 5. Tackling climate change. Africa must lead by example in the fight against climate change, ensuring that sustainable development is at the core of national policies. Investment in renewable energy and green technologies will benefit both the environment and the economy. 6. Ensuring social inclusion. Land reform and wealth redistribution must be implemented in a way that benefits all citizens and addresses historical inequalities. Social cohesion and political stability are built on policies that are fair, just, and inclusive. Summary of key messages. 1. Inclusive economic transformation. South Africa's land reform policies, economic diversification, and commitment to sustainable development serve as important lessons for Africa. Leaders must prioritize inclusive economic policies that address the needs of marginalized communities and ensure equitable growth. 2. Investing in future generations. Education, skills development, and innovation are critical for building resilient economies. African leaders must focus on preparing the next generation for the challenges and opportunities of the global economy. 3. Regional and global cooperation. South Africa's leadership in regional integration and its commitment to global diplomacy can serve as a model for other African nations. Africa's future prosperity lies in closer economic cooperation, both within the continent and with the rest of the world. 4. Sustainable development and climate action. Addressing the challenges of climate change through sustainable policies and green energy investment will be key to Africa's future. African leaders must prioritize the environment while ensuring that development benefits all citizens. 5. Good governance and accountability. Transparent governance, the rule of law, and anti-corruption efforts are essential for creating a stable, just society where all citizens can thrive. The road ahead for Africa is challenging, but the continent has the resources, the talent, and the resilience to build a prosperous and sustainable future. By taking bold actions, promoting regional cooperation, and prioritizing social inclusion and environmental sustainability, African leaders can guide their nations towards long-term stability and prosperity. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the escalating tensions between South Africa and the U.S. What do you think the future holds for these two nations? Will this back and forth between Musk and Malema lead to greater divides or greater unity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Bold African Voice, BAV, for more critical analyses and the latest updates on African politics. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay bold.